podcast is back. And after a couple weeks of some kind of lackluster fight nights, we're finally here. We got UFC 267, Yan Blachowicz versus Old Man Glover. In the co-main event, the paper champs on the sideline, so we got the interim champ up for grabs here, the bantamweight division. We've got Petr Yan taking on Corey Sandhagen. You combine that with the slew of Russian talent that's on this card. We've got the return of Khamzat Chimaev. It's free on TV on Saturday morning. Prelims start at 10:30 Eastern. We're on Fight Island. Doesn't get much better than this, man. We're hoping to ride some momentum from last week into a big pay-per-view.
Yeah. Happy to see us in the positive again, finally, after a couple of really close weeks. We started off the night with Jeff Molina, Daniel Lacerdo doesn't go the distance. Like you said earlier, we probably should have hit that harder.
Sure,
to get it at plus money was a great pickup.
But at flyweights, you still gotta had to have some reserve too.
For sure. And then the next fight, we bet only a unit on Kama Worthy versus Jai Herbert under 2.5. Another one we probably could have hit harder, knowing Kama's history of getting knocked out. But it is what it is. We're glad we played it. The next one. Sucks. We had Souza against Randa Marcos for a unit, and honestly, our bet looked like a great bet multiple times in the fight. It's just Souza's a little bit of a quitter.
Yeah, a little bit of a gasser.
A little bit of a gasser. I think she has a little bit of quit on her as well. Then one that I'm not too proud of, it was the heavyweights over 1.5 between Negramanu and Villanueva. Tough one right there.
Right, yeah. For sure. I definitely didn't see Ike going out as easy as he did. It seemed like he's not really able to take a punch anymore.
Yeah, it's. I think that his future in the UFC is probably done. Francisco Trinaldo versus Dwight Grant.
A little sweaty.
Point
deduction, but a little sweaty.
I think it was a good play. Trinaldo definitely was the side there,
100%.
But the point deduction made it a little bit sweatier than we'd like, for sure.
29-27 Grant, absolutely just absurd, know.
And then for the 5th time in a row, the main event goes the distance. We miss out on Costa Vittori. Fight doesn't go the distance. We only hit it for a unit, but it was a pretty exciting fight. Both fighters came out there, and I think that we definitely had the value side, especially where we got Vittori. We had locked him in for a unit and a half at -108. He ended up getting like -200 by fight time. So I'm happy with our bets, and I'm happy that we went positive.
Yeah, no, it got a little worrisome going up to 205 pounds and stuff, but we talked about it all week, man. Paulo Costa he didn't look like he was there, man. Something definitely was off with him, and I was actually real confident with Vittori going into that fight.
Yes.
Make sure you guys like the video. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and we're about to get into it.
We start off in the flyweight division where we see Tagir Ulanbekov taking on Allan Nascimento. Ulanbekov kind of starts the card off as our first Russian monster. He's a longtime training partner of Khabib, and his debut against Bruno Silva really isn't getting the love that I think it should. As we both know, as we cashed on Bruno Silva in his last fight, he's a monster. He's overlooked, and he's got great training partners with Henry Cejudo. And to do what Ulanbekov did to him, I think it was really good especially for a debut.
Absolutely.
It's a tough opponent to take on. Ulanbekov, usually the taller fighter in there, but for this one, he's not going to be. And I actually think that that's going to work into his advantage. I was really impressed with Tagir's ability to get in on the hips of Bruno Silva in their fight, and Bruno Silva is significantly shorter. Now we're going to have somebody like Nascimento, who's more than willing to bail out and try and go for a leg or pull guard, because most of his wins also come by submission. Honestly, I don't think that Nascimento's gas tank is up to snuff, and I think ultimately Ulanbekov's pressure will probably get to him, and come that 3rd round, we could see an Ulanbekov submission, maybe a ground and pound finish, but I do see Ulanbekov getting this done. I know it's some flyweight, so trying to bank on the inside the distance is difficult, but you get a nice price tag at like plus 190, plus 180. Yeah,
at least you get plus money. Not necessarily on him inside the distance, but all the way on Tagir here myself. You talked about him being a long-time partner of Khabib. There's pictures out there of these guys when they're like 16 years old, shirtless in the mountains and training. So he really might be a cousin of Khabib, He fought a real tough slate of Russians, over on the European scene, which is pretty different from Nascimento's relatively weak, Brazilian regional scene that he went through. I see a lot of people, the one loss Tagir has is to Zalgas Ismagulov. And I've seen a whole lot of people saying that was a robbery. And so this week I finally got the time, went back and watched it. And man, that we have not been robbed that bad before. It is just absolute straight up robbery. Doing a little bit of digging, it was in Fight Nights Global, which is in Kazakhstan, the same place as August is from. And then the 3 fights after that, Tagir doesn't fight in that organization anymore before coming to the UFC. It was a pretty shady decision here, but other than that, man, I see nothing really but things I love from Tagir. Really good pressure, good chain wrestling and trips up against the fence. His striking, he's got the more of Khabib style, not more the Mustafaev style, Zabit style. He's not as clean on the feet. You saw Bruno Silva really tear the calf kick up and laying that a whole bunch. But yeah, I favor Tagir here. Allan, what is he? Diego Shootbox guy. When I was looking through his Instagram, you see Allan Patrick on there. You see the champ Charles Oliveira, Thomas Almeida. So he's training with some good guys. You brought up his size for flyweight, which nice, but at the same time, when you're trying to defend a whole lot of takedowns in a stylistic matchup like this, I think it's going to be bad. He's only fought 1 time since the Contender Series in 2018, and it was up at 135 pounds. Click on that guy. He's 5'3", so pretty easy, generous matchups for him. Probably give him the stand-up edge, but just because there's not a lot coming from Tagir, I think there's a little bit of Muay Thai background from Allan, but you talk about majority of his wins do come by submission. He's got a bunch of triangles, heel hooks, knee bars, and stuff off his back. And
it's not going to work against the upper echelon wrestling of Ulanbekov.
That's exactly what I was about to get at, man. I think it's just a horrible style to accept, bottom position on such a dominant wrestler. Tagir is a pretty damn comfortable parlay piece for me to kick the morning off on Saturday.
Heck yeah.
Next up, we're in the lightweight division where we see Damir Ismagulov, who's 23-1, taking on Magomed Mustafaev, who's 14-4. Damir returned last time out after a 2-year layoff. A lot of people thought he took like a step down in competition, taking on Rafael Alves, but at the same time, maybe doing the UFC a little bit of a favor, beating the guy who comes out there and misses weight by like 15 pounds. He's kind of quietly climbing his way through the ranks. For someone who's kind of a casual fan on the outside, you probably never heard of Damir, but for someone like us who really dives into the sport, we know this guy's legit, and we know his skill set is very legit, and that it can really considered a dark horse of the division. M1 champion, been the full 25 minutes. He's got a 5'10" frame with a 74-inch reach, and he knows how to stick to the end of his punches very, very well. The guy's on an 18-fight win streak and incredibly well-rounded. Mustafaev is a talented striker. I think Damir is probably equally as talented on the feet, and will probably have a big advantage if this fight goes to the mat. I talked about Mustafaev. He's one of the Russians that preferably likes to strike. I know he can out-wrestle Brad Riddell and land a couple takedowns there, but when he faces a legit wrestler like Kevin Lee, man, he gets taken down a bunch and he gets submitted in round 2. So I'm not sold that this guy is even one of these Russians that has top-level grappling. He fights real inconsistently here. I'm on Damir, man. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think Damir is the fucking goods, man. He really is. He's, like you said, he's coming from M1, and that's probably my favorite organization outside of the UFC. And he ran that lightweight division for a few years. Honestly, like you said, I do think he's still taking a step down in competition. He's 4-0 in the UFC, but all 4 of those by unanimous decision. It's just hard to back a guy promotionally when he's not really delivering you highlights to kind of feed him up the ranks. I do think we're in for another unanimous decision here. Mustafaev is a tough son of a bitch, and with his 2 losses, they're just steep competition, so you really can't fault him. And I tried to make a case for Mustafaev, trying to find areas that in MMA that he's better than Ismagulov in, but I don't think that there is any, man. I truly don't. The big problem with like Mustafaev's offense is that he wants people to push the pace on him. You talked about the spinning techniques that he tries to utilize. Well, he's really accounting for the forward aggression of his opponents to walk into those. And Damir is one of the most defensively sound fighters I've ever seen, and really a master of dragging those fights out and allowing his opponents to be the ones that make the mistakes. I think that we'll probably see Mustafaev try some of those spinning attacks and actually whiff on those, and it'll look bad, and we'll kind of see a Floyd Mayweather-esque Ismagulov point victory.
Yeah, man, I don't disagree with anything you said there. I like how much you touched on how just defensively sound it is, man. It's a surgical approach to every single one of these fights you see from Doesn't put himself in danger. I love his boxing. I love his calf kick to negate a whole lot of that lateral movement that you'll see from Magomed. And yeah, I think he whiffs on a whole bunch of those spinning techniques, but that really might be his puncher's chance to get it done here. I think Damir is better in every facet of this game.
Mm-hmm. Our next fight takes place in the middleweight division, where we see Yaozong versus Andrei Petroski. This fight's kind of laughable, man. I don't think that Yaozong is worthy of competing in the UFC. This will be the first time that he's competing in middleweight, and judging by the first two fights that he took in the UFC, it was a much-needed career move. Petroski, he's one of the more muscled-up 185ers, and he's one of the guys that usually relies on his wrestling to get the fight to the mat, control it. And obviously, the biggest knock on Andre, if you look down his record, you see his loss in tough. It's his cardio, man. Mm-hmm. He's always had that lackluster cardio, and I don't really think it's something that he's going to be able to fix. His style really requires those explosive movements and a bunch of strength to complete. And I think that his best chances whenever he is fighting is to win it early. I know that in his last fight against Michael Gilmore, it kind of got dragged out to the third round, but he controlled him for 8 out of the 13 minutes that the fight lasted, and there were plenty of finishing opportunities. It just turns out that Michael Gilmore is pretty fucking tough. Yaozong, he showed awful defense in the Cyril Asker fight when it comes to takedowns, and I know a lot of people are going to say that Asker's a heavyweight, but Petroski's one of the better pure wrestlers at 185, and I don't think that Yaozong's going to have much to offer him outside of trying to drag this fight out. He might have some toughness on him. The fact that Petroski took it on short notice makes me want to stay away from betting Petroski, although I do think he gets it done. I really lean heavily on the fight doesn't go the distance, sitting around minus 180 right now. I think that should be around a minus 300, 350, considering both these guys' record of not seeing the judges.
Yeah, man, I don't really know how much I can add to it. You pretty much hit everything that I was going to say too. He's coming off a 3-year layoff now. There's a ton of question marks around him when you look at him online. I know he did some Tiger Muay Thai training in the past. There was pictures of him at Jackson Wink, but that's 3 years ago, and he's not posted anything on his social media. I don't know what he's going to show up like on Saturday, if he's going to even make the middleweight limit on Saturday.
Right.
He talked about his debut against Cyril Asker, or however you say it. It is up at heavyweight, and he's outweighed by about 25 pounds in that fight. I think Cyril Asker shows up about 250, whereas Yaozong showed up about 225 or something, about 220 that fight. And he did get out wrestled pretty easily and gave up the rear naked choke. So, I feel like if Petroski does get this fight down, there will be opportunities for him to get the submission. On the feet, though, when he was fighting Rashad Coulter, who missed weight at 205 pounds, he showed a hell of a chin, man. He looks very, very durable. I believe he's got some Chinese wrestling background. I don't want to compare that anywhere to Andre's, but I don't know if he's going to be technically lost on the mat. He showed that he's got some really good kicks at range, a nice counter right hand. But Petroski, for me, was like the front runner for the season to win. I really, really liked what I saw from this guy, and I thought skill-wise, with the grappling credentials he had the most upside, to win it. But then you factor in his cardio issues that he showed in that Brian Battle fight, and having to fight and tough so often and cutting weight. It's just a bad mix for a guy like himself. And you talk about taking this one on short notice. Yeah, man, I don't want to, especially when it opened as a pick'em on Bet Online, and now he's swelled to a very significant favorite. Yeah, I'm not eager to bet Petroski here whatsoever. In the Michael Gilmore fight, it going to round 3 and him offering very, very little resistance is kind of what has me in the reserve. But he still finished the fight in the third round, and you're getting doesn't go the distance at minus 175, where both of them historically don't. I don't necessarily hate it, but I don't know what he was going to look like on Saturday. And, I guess if it's really good, he has potential to finish Andre, and if it's really bad, he has potential to get finished. So I don't hate your play.
All right. That, maybe it's something that we can look at for a parlay piece later on down the road. After talking about Ismagulov, that might be something that we consider.
For sure. Next up in the featherweight division, we have Makwan Amirkhani, who's 16-6, taking on Lerone Murphy, who's 10-0-1. Makwan, he looks to be doing his work out of his own gym now in Finland. I don't believe he's doing any more work at SBG Ireland and stuff. On the feet, there is nothing to love about Makwan Amirkhani, really. He has not a whole lot of volume or anything. The guy averages 1.5 significant strikes landed per minute. When you look down through some of his fights, the Arnold Allen fight, it goes to full 15 minutes. He lands 17 strikes. The Burgos fight, he gets finished in round 3. He lands 22 strikes. The Edson Barboza fight, it goes to full 3 rounds. 11 strikes. And let me just reiterate one more time, the Kamala Kirk fight, 20 strikes, man. It's just, there's not a lot to love. And if he does stand at range with Lerone Murphy, he's playing with fire. But Lerone, he's an Englishman, man, and you'll hear it time and time again from me. The grappling is not up to snuff, and that is where Makwan always has success. When you look at Lerone Murphy's fight with Zubaira Tukhugov, I know it's a draw, and I know he came back and made those last 2 and 3 rounds close. Zubaira, man, had a ton of success with the grappling early, and if Makwan's able to replicate that, he's going to hunt for the submissions way more than Zubaira did. He's going to be looking for the front chokes, the anaconda, the darce. I feel like Makwan, if this goes to decision, I feel like Makwan's already covered his price tag with the advantage Lerone Murphy is supposed to have on the feet, warranting a minus 300, minus 350 favorite. He needs to come out here and put Makwan away, and just not convinced that he does so, man.
Yeah, yes, I think that the price is too wide. Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. But I don't know if I feel comfortable backing Makwan. I'll be, first to say that in that last fight against Kamala Kirk, he got screwed, man. Yeah. That was clearly Makwan's fight, and he should be coming into this on a, winning streak. Right. At this point in Makwan's career, you talked about him training at his own gym. I feel like he's not taking the proper steps to develop his game like most of the long-standing UFC fighters have to do. Mm-hmm. He's past 30 now. He's getting at the point in his career where he's in his prime physically, but the technical aspects of MMA are kind of passing him up.
You just don't see any improvements from fight to fight.
At all. I will say one thing is that in his last fight, he did look significantly more muscled up, but I do think that probably took a hit on his cardio and is why we saw him kind of fall off in that 3rd round. Like I said, even if he did win that fight, we're talking about a guy who we were forgiving him for getting losses to guys like Shane Burgos and Barbosa, but you can't make a fight with Kamala Kirk close and be at the point he is in his career in the UFC. Right now, Lerone Murphy, he's kind of the hot stuff. He is the hype train, and he's real deal, man. Yeah. 2-0-1 in the UFC, and yeah, he was out wrestled by Zubaira in the past, but damn, man, he's so athletic that he can utilize his own athleticism to get his takedowns, and he's got punishing shots whenever he does get you in compromising positions. And yeah, I personally, if Makwan can muscle him to the ground, which I don't think that he's going to be early just because of Lerone Murphy's athleticism, he's going to be able to stand up. And Makwan, it's a terrible time. Makwan, it's a terrible time to have cardio issues this late in the game. It's an awful time to switch up because we have seen in the past him have some of the most success in his career in those later rounds, but it's tough whenever his past fight is his worst cardio performance. Mm-hmm. I think that Lerone Murphy, if he keeps this fight standing, he'll probably pick Makwan apart and we'll probably see a finish. I don't think that he's going to cover that price tag. I'd probably put Lerone as a minus 200. But as that Amirkhani line creeps up, it does get more and more tempting.
Yeah, and one thing to note for Lerone Murphy, he's had 3 fights now in the UFC. Mm-hmm. 2 of them have been on Fight Island. So the flight, the time difference, not really anything new to him. Mm-hmm. That is something that he'll probably have going in his favor. I like really what I see from him on the feet. His boxing's good. He doesn't waste a whole lot of energy. I think his calf kick is going to tear Amirkhani up. Lerone, he's also got, he's built like a brick shit house. Amirkhani's really going to have to work, I think, to get this fight to the mat. But if he does, I think he could cover the price tag.
What else kind of scares me is Makwan, truly, if you look down his career, he hasn't had a notable win. You know, maybe Jason Knight was his biggest win. Lerone Murphy having a draw to Zubaira might be more impressive, you know? So yeah, I don't know. The more we talk about it, the more I'm kind of thinking this is Murphy's fight, but I'm okay with laying off of it.
I agree with you.
Our next fight takes place in the light heavyweight division where we see Michal Oleksiejczuk taking on Shamil Gamzatov. Shamil's a combo sambat world champion. He has a solid ground game. He's undefeated. But his biggest knock is definitely inactivity. Not reassuring that the last time we saw him was like 3 years ago, and it was a split decision over Klidson Abreu. Klidson didn't have a great UFC career, but he is a decent fighter. Oleksiejczuk, on the other hand, should be riding a 3-fight win streak or losing streak right now. And if you think about it, he's probably the reason why we saw Bukauskas get cut this week. I think the most likely way that this plays out is Shamil doing enough to get the fight to the ground in the first 2 rounds, and then probably gassing a little bit, and we could see Oleksiejczuk kind of take over, trying to get the KO in that 3rd round. But ultimately, I think that Shamil will end up edging it out, winning a 29-28.
Yeah, man, round 3 between these two guys is going to be a shit show. Neither one of them have a gas tank worth a shit. Michal Oleksiejczuk trains over in Poland. He's only 26 years old, so there's still a whole lot of room for improvement for the guy. He's very experienced for his age. He comes in, and the UFC has some pretty high hopes for the guy. They match him up with Khalil Roundtree right out the gates, and he ends up beating Khalil Roundtree. But then he's popped by USADA after that, and you can still tell the UFC really, really likes this guy because they match him up with Gian Vellante and Damir on his run back. And he TKOs them both in the first round, but, that doesn't really tell me a whole lot, to be honest with you. It's when you face OSP and you can't get the big light heavyweight out of there and you end up gassing and giving up the Von Flue choke, man. I know OSP pulls it off, but man, I was taught how to defend that before I was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, And then Jim Crute just absolutely just mauling this guy, taking him down and slicing right through him on the mat. He's very undersized for 205, and I feel like Shamil, if he is going to use his size, this is the fight to do it, because on the feet, he definitely struggled with the southpaw in Klidson Abreu. Shamil is a southpaw as well, so whenever these guys are in the gym, they don't really see a whole lot of other southpaws, and I think Gamzatov struggled with that. And the body kick to the liver, the left hand from Klidson Abreu, they were landing, and Michal has got a whole bunch of speed and a whole lot more technicality in his striking than Klidson Abreu did. With Shamil, he is part of that Russian mob, and you're right, very inconsistent. The last time he fought was on the Zabit Cater card, where there was a Russian in every other fight on the card, So that's only going to be his 2nd fight in the UFC. He's coming off, I believe, a 2-year layoff now himself. I feel like he is the more talented guy all around. Michal Oleksiejczuk can come out there and get on you early with his pace and his pressure. I feel like if you're going to take him, you only take him by TKO, which I saw somebody take at like plus 550. That's the play to make, man, because his output, like I said, it takes a nosedive after round 1. And even if he does win round 1, man, I see round 2 and 3 going to Shamil. He already walked away with a very, very close split decision to Klidson Abreu. And on Fight Island with all the Russians, man, if it is a close one, I'm probably going to lean Shamil again. Next up in the welterweights, we have Zaleski dos Santos, who's 22-7, taking on Benoit Saint-Denis, who is 8-0. With Zaleski, he doesn't have necessarily the best wrestling to me, but he does have some pretty good jiu-jitsu and stuff. And from what I can look and see on Saint-Denis' record, Zaleski probably doesn't want to play any other ground game with him. That's usually where Saint-Denis has a whole bunch of his success. Zaleski definitely should keep this one on the feet. He's a pretty dynamic striker at times. He can switch stances, got a whole bunch of kicks in his arsenal. You'll see the nice body kick from southpaw. You'll see him break out the capoeira kicks at times. I just think he's going to be a whole lot better on the feet than his counterpart here. But I do, want to say that I feel like Benoit is going to bring a ton of pressure at this guy round 1, and potentially, Zaleski dos Santos could potentially wind up on his back in round 1, and you might get a better price tag on him live. With Benoit, he's working the last few months down in Brazil. Looking at his Instagram, you see him training with RDA a little bit with Carlston Harris down there. He was getting some work in with some high-level guys, but he hasn't seen near the level of competition that Zaleski has over his UFC tenure. With Benoit, he's automatically, I feel like, just going to go to the ground as early as he can in this fight. Looking through the historically and the past resume of Zaleski, he's given up takedowns to Nicholas Dalby, to Omari. You saw, Luigi jump on his back early.
Mm-hmm.
There's been times where I feel like the grappling has been a problem for Dos Santos, but I think he's facing a whole lot higher level competition when that is a problem. I'm going to go with Zaleski Dos Santos, but there's not going to be a bet here from me, man. I'd really like to see Saint-Denis in the octagon before I either fade him or play him,
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the line changes. I guess if the line continued to go down for Zaleski, I would consider pulling the trigger on him. But you touched on something that I really wanted to, and it's the Luigi Venturini fight. That really could have changed the trajectory of his career, and it's a mental lapse that I've seen him have in a couple of fights that I think somebody like Benoit, who is able to lock up those submissions, could capitalize on. Turns out Luigi's not as good as we thought. And, if he was a ground specialist, he would have locked up that submission. I mean, he had him in the most compromised position you could possibly want and just couldn't pull it off. The thing I'm kind of worried about is that Benoit isn't really the biggest 170er. We saw in his last two fights that he was at the catchweight 165. And I think that that's going to kind of hurt him in this fight where he would like to be the bigger guy and take advantage of him on the ground. You talked about the capoeira style of Zaleski, and that does make him a lot of a threat when it comes to stand-up. But it's not, it's not a style that I personally would like to center my striking style around. I don't think it's the most effective striking style, and I am curious to see a little bit more tape before I try and fade Benoit, and I'd like to see it against higher level guys, like you said.
Yeah, if there's anything I might look at in this one with Saint-Denis, record and stuff of him not seeing rounds 2 and 3 very much, might look at Zaleski Dos Santos props for him to finish in round 2 or 3. You saw him, weather the storm in the Luigi fight, take over and finish him. Mm-hmm. You saw in the Omari Akhmedov fight, he gives up round 1 and 2 with giving a bunch of takedowns, comes back and lands a knee in round 3 on a tired Omari to finish him. So Zaleski, I feel like, is going to have the cardio advantage here and might be able to take advantage of a guy who's just not seen those later rounds. But yeah, I'm probably going to pass on this one.
And it looks like you can get Zaleski inside the distance at plus money. So that is something that maybe we should consider playing. We move up to the middleweight division where we see Albert Duraev versus Roman Kopylov. Duraev is the newest guy to come out of Chechnya, and he's a motherfucker, man.
Yeah, he is.
He's a switch stance fighter. He has devastating strikes from either side, and he accompanies that striking skill set with a mean ground game. Coming off the Contender Series, he got a neck crank over Caio Bittencourt where he tried to rip his head off. And, one thing I noticed after watching tape about him is that he tries to find your chin coming in and coming out of clinch situation. He throws some devastating uppercuts on the inside, and you can expect him whenever you're exiting the clinch to throw a hook very similar to the one that Yan caught Luke Rockhold with. It kind of seems like a setup fight for Duraev, especially when you consider the style of fighter that Kopylov is. Kopylov got welcomed into the UFC by Carl Roberson, who outgrappled him. That's pretty bad. Carl Roberson's kind of known for having weaknesses in grappling, and Kopylov's getting finished by him. Unless he's made some massive improvements in the 2 years that he's been off, I think that he'll be in for a pretty long night. And personally, I'm trying to play Duraev inside the distance, and I think you might see this the same way.
Absolutely, man. 100% on the side of Duraev here. Real quick with Kopylov, you talked about him. Just one fight in UFC so far, debuting against Carl Roberson. And, Kopylov, very talented M1 kickboxer. And then you look at Carl Roberson, very talented glory kickboxer. Mm-hmm. We thought it was going to be a nice, fun fight, and it was an absolute lackluster showing from both of them. Round 3, point deduction for Kopylov with the eye poke, makes Carl Roberson go to the grappling, and the glory kickboxer slices right through Kopylov on the mat to get the rear naked choke. That alone is just about all I need to see. Kopylov, he is a dangerous striker. He's got a nice body kick from southpaw. He's got a real nice knee that he likes to sneak up, and he'll dig the body. But yeah, man, I'm just not sold that he is going to be able to stop much of anything coming from Duraev. You look at Duraev, and he was just off of a 2 or 3 year layoff, and he made the improvements. He came back and he didn't skip a beat. So I don't even want to read too much into Romans and thinking he's going to make those improvements, because I just saw Duraev has made those improvements in his last time out. He posted on his Instagram, he was hitting a heavy bag. He's saying Kopylov just doesn't worry him, man. When he was when you look about the guys he's fighting there in ACB, where he's the middleweight and the welterweight champion, he says, I put all these strikers away with my hands before I submit them. He is not lost whatsoever on the feet here. And you can tell the UFC really, really likes this guy. Kopylov's taking it on short notice here. They actually matched him up with Alessio Di Chirico, who is 2 months removed from getting his head sent into orbit by Al Hassan. The UFC really likes Duraev. Like you said, the new Chechen guy in town. I have Duraev parlayed quite a few times. I love him inside the distance. I'm curious to see, he him inside the distance is minus 120, but I know you could get the fight doesn't go the distance for a minus 170. And Roman's got, he's got some stuff to offer on the feet. I'm all the way on the Duraev side, but yeah, we're going to probably bet him inside the distance.
Mm-hmm.
In our featherweight division, we have Zubaira Tukhugov, who's 19-5-1, taking on Ricardo Ramos, who's 15-3. With Zubaira, he's under the guidance of Javier Mendez, part of the Islam squad there. Like most of those guys, he comes in with a smart game plan, sticks to what he knows, and sticks to the wrestling. All of his losses come by way of split decision. His career could look a little bit different, but it's really about how the judges are going to reward grappling and control time. But we are in Fight Island. Ali manages him. He's on the card with all the Russians. I feel like control time is going to get rewarded for him on Saturday. A lot of people will talk about the Lerone Murphy fight and his gas tank that he had in that fight. He was sweating bad and he was gassing bad. But to his defense, he was coming off a 3-year layoff of that one, popped by USADA for 2 years, and then suspended for his part in the Conor McGregor and Khabib brawl. So he'd been out of the cage for a very, very long time. And then, when he comes back, he just dusts Kevin Aguilar in 1 round. And then you kind of see the cardio and stuff take a dip again in the Dawodu fight. So it is something to keep in mind for Tukhugov as he doesn't really, I guess, have a bunch of control. These guys are able to get back to their feet, and it does make him work a little bit. But I do think he's going to have success finding the takedown here on Ricardo Ramos. Sure, Ricardo Ramos can take down Ayman Zahabi, Journey Newsom at 35. Sure, he can take down Eduardo Garagori, who I was told Darren Elkins was very warranted of his minus 220 favorite of that. You beat it into my head that Bill Algeo was not going to be able to defend Ricardo Ramos' takedowns, but they're it's tailor-made matchups for him to wrestle. When he gets guys like even Lerone Murphy, who's just very strong. I mean, I know Lerone got swept by the momentum, but Lerone really landed 2 takedowns in that fight, one being a nice double leg that landed, or that, led to the ground and pound finish he had. I really think Zubaira is a good bet here. Ricardo was making 35 a couple years ago. Zubaira should get this fight down to the mat. I'm going to go by decision like he normally does. Bunch of control time for him.
Yeah, pretty much, exactly what you said. I've got Zubaira here. Like you said, he had some tough competition, and it's when he's facing upper echelon people is when he has close fights. Anytime that he fights anybody who's subpar, like Kevin Aguilar, you see him wipe the floor with them. Right. He's the type of guy who will stand on the feet for as long as he has to before he works into those takedowns. That's definitely where he has the most success. As of recently, that's also where Ricardo's had success. But I think he's in a really tough spot here against a much better wrestler. And grappling versus grappling, I definitely think Tukhugov is going to be the one who ends up on top and will most likely win those positional, scrambles and have the control time on the judges' scorecards. He's the rightful favorite. But I don't know if Ricardo Ramos is somebody who I can put up in the Lerone Murphy, Hakeem Dawodu, Renato Moicano realm. So, depending on how you rank Ricardo Ramos, I guess will determine whether or not you think that laying favorite odds on somebody like Zubaira is worth it, knowing that he splits with anybody who's decent.
Yeah, and I think that's a big point that you hit. He's going to split decisions with much top-level talent compared to Ricardo Ramos, in my opinion. Zubaira is one of the best lines you can get on the Russians this weekend, you know. And I think we're debating it. Could be a potential play for us.
Yeah, for sure. This is our prelim main event and actually a casual cap challenge for this week. We've got in the strawweight division Amanda Ribas versus Verna Jandiroba. And this is a great matchup, man. This is Amanda's first fight back since suffering that UFC loss to Marina Rodriguez, who we now know is the real fucking deal, man. She took 8 months off after that beating, and I think that was the right amount of time to kind of get her bearings back and get back on track. Both these girls have legit grappling skills, and in their past, they've definitely relied on those to get the fights where they're comfortable. The issue is kind of when they're forced to stand and strike. I think that this will probably be like that perfect example of two primary grapplers who cancel each other out, and it'll be who's more polished on the feet is going to come out victorious. In this case, I think it'll probably be Ribas, man. She's got nearly double the amount of strikes per minute compared to Verna, and she's got a 23% better striking defense. To throw on top of it, Ribas is the longer, taller fighter. And I honestly think that we're going to see Ribas kind of stick to the outside, and we're going to see Verna start to panic shoot. After about the third round, I think that the damage that she's accumulated, that Ribas has been able to stuff those takedowns, she'll end up either getting finished or get 10-8'd in the third.
This is going to be an interesting casual cap because, man, I see this fight so much different. With Ribas, she's been out for 8 months because she's been dealing with COVID twice, man. Something, I don't know the statistics of it. I know Volk came back and looked amazing after dealing with it, but it is something to note that she's had to battle that here. I think this is excellent matchmaking. You have the number 11 ranked fighter fighting the number 12 ranked fighter. They both have very similar skill sets into how they have success in fights. With Amanda Ribas, you know, I look at who she's beaten. Emily Whitmire, cut. Mackenzie Dern, off a 1.5 layoff, having a baby. You know, I will stand by the fact 100% Verna Jandiroba fought a twice as good Mackenzie Dern as Amanda Ribas did. You know, she's now with Jason Perillo and stuff. Much better Mackenzie Dern. Randa Marcos, man, she was, you know, almost a rear naked choke away from losing her job on Saturday in round 1. And then who's the other girl that she just beat? Paige Van Zandt at 125 pounds, cut. Amanda Ribas has not really shown anything to me. You did bring out some striking statistics that are pretty good. The volume, you know, her striking defense. But it's a 50-50 fight to me. And with two girls, you know, who are very good at jiu-jitsu, grappling, canceled out, Amanda Ribas really hasn't shown me enough in her fights against very low-level girls that she's warranted of continuing to climb to a -160 favorite and stuff. And at the same time, I could just be speaking out of my ass, but for some reason, man, I think Verna's jiu-jitsu is just better than Amanda Ribas. I know she's got the black belt in judo and stuff, but, man, Verna is strong. Looking on the embeddeds and stuff, I know they put Amanda Ribas in her little bikini and stuff on there. She's a little toothpick, man, and Verna it's not. I think Verna comes in and improves every single fight, and that Kanako Murata fight, a damn good almost Olympic caliber wrestler, that's a very good person to negate and to, you know, to lay heavy on someone who's willing to play guard. And Verna Jandiroba went out there and got on her early with the hands. I will stand by the fact that I think Verna improves every single time I see her out there in the cage. I think she's going to be twice as strong as Ribas when they clinch up. And it's a 50-50 fight in my opinion. I think I got great odds at +135 on Jandiroba. And there's nothing more than a close prelim main event that we just don't see eye to eye on, man. I can't wait to watch that with you on Saturday. Kicking off the 267 main card, we're in our light heavyweight division. We've got Magomed Ankalaev, who's 15-1, taking on Volkan Ozdemir, who's 17-5. And we will say it time and time again. I will beat a dead horse again, man. This guy and Magomed Ankalaev, he's the future, man. We really do think this guy's going to touch gold. And I know Jerry Prokadze, Alexander Rakic really kind of looked at as the top contenders in that division right now. But Magomed is right behind him, man, and we'll have a whole lot of eyes on him in a big fight. If he does get through Volkan on Saturday, he's one of these Russians, you know, that really come to mind to me as he's got no holes. Like, the guy is just such a good wrestler, grappler, and such a good striker. It's like, are you going to go out there and out wrestle him? Absolutely not. And are you going to stand at range and want to pick apart at this guy at strikes? Fuck no, man. Ask Ion Cutelaba what striking with this guy is like. And outside of just a bonehead mistake with 1 second left of a fight, he is dominating. He should be undefeated. He's got nasty ground and pound, switches from both stances. His left hook is money, absorbs less than 2 strikes per minute. There's just so much to love about Magomed. For Volkan, the UFC is just doing him, again, absolute zero favors, He's already had to fight the 2 people I just mentioned in Alexander Rakic and Jiri Prochazka, and now he's having to fight who a lot of people think the dark horse of the division is. Last time out against Jiri Prochazka, he was in Abu Dhabi. Here he is again. He got KO'd in round 2. He tries to dip and counter with the left hand. He's got fight-ending power, but when he closes distance, it's very, very sloppy. It's almost Ion Cutelaba-like. And I think Magomed's going to put this guy away. Part of our 5-unit parlay on Saturday. Going to go with Magomed Ankalaev, brother.
Yeah, man. I don't really see a way that Magomed loses this. And since that drop to Paul Craig, he's been nothing short of dominant, He's training out of Eagle Sport with Shamil Abdurakhimov. And at 29 years old, I truly do think that he's kind of coming into his prime and the most dangerous version that we've seen of him yet. When it comes to the technique of his game, it is light years ahead of people, and I think that you can really compare that to somebody like Zabit Magomed-Sharipov, who, although he might have his cardio issues, he's the most technical fighter in 145, in my opinion. When it comes to Oezdemir, I feel very, very differently, man. I personally think he got fast-tracked into the top 5 of the division with a very limited skill set and a big weakness in his ground game, which we've seen exploited multiple times in his UFC career. And I know that we're talking about guys like Daniel Cormier and Anthony Smith, who are both ground specialists, but I actually think that Ankalaev can exploit that same hole as well. Ankalaev definitely a primary striker, but we can't forget where he's from. He averages only 1 takedown per fight, but it's something that he's relied on more recently, scoring 3 takedowns in his last fight against Krylov. I think my biggest concern in betting Ankalaev is that he doesn't throw enough volume to secure some of his victories like some guys would. Ankalaev in his 6 UFC fights, he's never actually thrown more than 100 strikes and only ever landed more than 50 strikes once, and that was in his loss to Paul Craig. Volkan, he has a victory over Alexander Rakic, which kind of relates to my concern. Rakic thought he was edging out those rounds, but the judges put more weight on the forward pressure and aggressiveness of Volkan rather than the technical striking of Rakic. And I could see kind of Magomed falling into that problem. But like I said, if he resorts to his grappling, that's his path to victory. That's where he's going to find the most success, in my opinion. And to try and stand on the feet against somebody who, like Oezdemir, who's really only shown a one-dimensional path to victory, would be silly. So I'd love that we fucking took a stab on Ankalaev by submission at plus 2,600. That line is absolutely broken. We've already seen that same line open up at DraftKings at a plus 1,200. I mean, I honestly think that sniping that line was one of the better things our podcast have done to date.
I'm with you, man. I would love nothing more than to make, 5 units off a Magomed sub.
Off a 0.2 stab.
Off a 0.2 stab, cash a first leg of our 5-unit parlay. Magomed's the real deal. I don't really know how much more I can add to it there. It's about all you're going to get from me.
We move down to the welterweight division where we see Li Jingliang taking on Khamzat Chimaev. Chimaev is actually who rounds out our 5-unit parlay for this fight card. And Preston and I have been saying all week how excited we are to see Boris back in action, man.
Yes, sir.
After rewatching his tape, it's hard not to get fired up about his return. Like, he's been nothing short of dominant since entering the UFC as well. And I don't think I'm out of pocket in saying that I think he's cut from the same cloth that Khabib is, man. He's got legit power in his striking that makes his opponents respect his stand-up, and then he has a straight right that perfectly sets up his takedown entries where he's really able to take over, man. He sticks to you like a leech, and he's cool as a cucumber doing it. And I forget which fight it was, but I saw him take the back of somebody and get his mouthpiece knocked out, and him pick it up, reposition it in his mouth, and then automatically sink in a rear naked choke. And it's just like, this dude's different. He has zero nerves going into there. And to be honest with you, I don't think that he's going to face true adversity until he's fighting somebody named Colby or Usman, or he moves up into 185 and fights the upper echelon of that division. When it comes to welterweights, man, I just think that he's too big, too strong, and too technical for any of them. I want to make this clear. I'm not overlooking Jing Liang's abilities. I just don't know where he's going to be able to find success here. He does have a sneaky left hook that he, has caught a couple people with off guard, but Jing Liang has been out-grappled in his last 2 losses by inferior grapplers in Jake Matthews and Neil Magny. And I'd be shocked if he offers any resistance to the Chimaev smash, man. So I've got Khamzat Chimaev. I think he covers any price tag, and I think that he's more likely to win than Islam Makhachev is later on the card.
Absolutely, man. Khamzat all day, and you talked about his price tag. I think it's warranted for sure, man. He was literally in the fight with. He was a bigger favorite in the fight with GM3 up at welterweight. The GM3 who just beat Muradov. It's warranted, man. With Jing Liang, trained out of the PI Institute there in Shanghai, and for me, I props to him for taking the fight, but maybe it's a little bit of punishment for ruining that comeback, and upsetting Ponzinibbio, who was a real welterweight contender prior to that. He was more than a 2-1 underdog to Zaleski dos Santos and Ponzinibbio. So again, I don't really see anything, wrong with this minus 400, 500 Khamzat Chimaev line. Where Jing Liang is going to have any success, it's probably the first 2 or 3 minutes of the fight where he's, slinging the big left hook like you talked about. But as the fight progresses, you talked about the Neil Magny, the Jake Matthews. As the fight definitely, goes later, his cardio takes a big dip. And we've not seen Lee the Leech have much success outside of China at all. I know he beat Ponzinibbio, but, it's like 30 seconds into the fight. We didn't really get to see much. And the Neil Magny and the other ones, he doesn't look good. With Khamzat, it is, like I put in our tweet, it is generational talent. There's a reason 3 fights into the UFC, this guy was trying to get matched up with Leon Edwards, a top 5 welterweight. The UFC knows it and everything. It's a nasty Russian, born there, got the wrestling credentials, but he's moved to All-Stars over in Sweden and developed that striking with Gus and Latifi and Kutat Daladze. There's a video out there of him dropping Gustafsson with a body shot. There's nothing that I don't like when I watch Chimaev tape. He's got a nasty body kick, great timing on the right hand, and when he's on top of you, his ground and pound opens up his submissions beautifully. You talked about him being tested by guys like Colby or Usman. Yeah, I do think it's going to be top-level guys that are going to be able to test that gas tank of him. We've not seen him past 6.5 minutes of fight time, and we haven't seen him really tested. So it is going to be in deep waters if Khamzat ever has a problem, but he's not shown me anything that I can say.
I know a lot of people are concerned about the COVID stuff that Chimaev's coming off of, and like you said, if we haven't seen him after 6 minutes, it's tough to bank that his cardio is going to be any better than it would have been before COVID. I don't know, man. I'm glad that we both see it the same way. Chimaev is the goods, and I'm happy that we're laying.
One thing I do want to talk about, he pulled out of the Leon Edwards fight. I think he pulled out of one more fight. He's tried to come back and felt like his body was not ready, and he pulled from the fights. He wouldn't be on this fight card if his body wasn't ready, in my opinion.
For what it's worth, I saw a Twitter bot this week comment and say that he trains with Chimaev and he looks better than ever. I don't know if that's true or not, but he seemed legit on his Twitter page.
Good stuff, man. Yeah, Khamzat all day, finishing out the 5-unit parlay to kick off the pay-per-view with Ankalaev. Let's make some money, man. In our heavyweight division, we see Alexander Volkov, who's 33-9, taking on Marcin Tybura, who's 22-6. Volkov has always been one of my big heavyweights favorites on the roster. Coming over from Bellator, he was a young champion over there. And I feel like the first real time I got to bet on him and kind of tell you guys about him was in the Fabricio Verdum fight when he knocked him out. And that was kind of his coming out party, man. I've seen him drastically grow as a fighter in every single fight. And he used to be that skinny point fighting style. But after kind of, showing that he's got to put on some weight in that Curtis Blades fight to keep guys off of him, man, it's taken his game to another level. He's been able to keep those guys off of him, stay off the fence, and his shots have a whole lot more pop on them. And he's shown us the capability to go 25 minutes time and time again. He's going to have the bigger cage on Saturday, so he's going to be able to keep his, keep on the outside, be able to jab away at Marcin with those teep kicks that he loves up the middle. He's got the real stiff jab, and whenever Marcin's covering up against the cage, Volkov's not swinging big hooks the way Hardy and Walt Harris was. He's so surgical the way that he breaks your guard and goes around it with the right hand. I really like this matchup for him. With Teixeira, in 2017, 2019, this guy lost 4 of his last 5 fights. He'd been knocked out in 3 of them. He's had a bit of a career turnaround. He's on a 5-fight win streak that can only be matched, by the 2 champions in the division right now. But, man, looking at it, Sergey Spivak, it's a young, good prospect, but I don't know really what we got with Sergey Spivak right now. Then you got a light heavyweight in Maxim Grishin, a 40-year-old, and Ben Rothwell, and Marcin was barely, able to escape the Hardy fight and the Walt Harris fight by the skin of his teeth, being dropped and almost finished. Just basically lucky neither one of those two have a gas tank worth of shit. That's where something Volkov showed me he has no problem. I really, really like Volkov here, man. Think you see it a little bit different?
Yeah, man. It was Klein the week before last. Mm-hmm. It was Choi last week. And I think this week it's Volkov, man. I mean, this is the trap fight that I think a lot of people are going to be putting into their parlays that could not work out. Personally, I think the odds makers are right for making Volkov the favorite, but I do think that it's a stretch thinking that he covers this at a 75% clip. Volkov, probably behind Francis, is the most intimidating fighter on the roster, and he would be a favorite over anybody outside of Cyril Gane or Francis. This just isn't the time where I feel the most comfortable backing him. Right now, he's coming off of his opportunity for a title shot that he didn't get, and in my opinion, he had a bad performance. It's not that he had a low output or anything, but he fought the exact fight that you can't fight against Gane, and he got into a point fight where, and this is a real statistic, he threw 99% of his strikes at distance. And it seemed like the only time that he did find success in that fight is when he moved forward. And going into that 4th, 5th round, there's no way that he thought he was up on the scorecards, and he didn't choose to change up that game plan. I'll be honest with you, I don't really see how Marcin's going to win this fight. He doesn't really have the power to put Volkov out like Derek Lewis does. He doesn't really have the size to bully him, and he's far less athletic than the opponents that Volkov has recently fought. But if Teixeira has success, I think it'll probably be trying to put this up against the cage and make it about as ugly as you could possibly get. And for what it's worth, right now, we're talking about Marcin Teixeira, who is probably the most active heavyweight right now. He's completely changed up his fight style where he does not care about making a fight pretty at all. He's more than happy in grinding out a decision. And he's adapted in his career where he's had a ton of experience. He came up on the M1 global scene as well. And he's somebody who I think matches Volkov on the experience level. And I think that he can cover this. I think that he's a little bit more likely to win than what the odds suggest. I don't think that he's going to be able to hold Volkov down, as you saw in the Curtis Blades fight. Like his get-up game is legit, but I do think that Marcin Teixeira is somewhat of a live dog. I'm not playing him myself. I'm just staying away from the fight. Like I didn't really cash on Landwehr. I kind of cashed on Caceres, but this is one that I'm obviously going to lay off of just because I don't see a direct path to victory for Marcin. But I think Volkov's in a tricky position here and one of the least confident Russians for me on this card.
Yeah, to his defense, Cyril Gane might be the absolute real deal and could very well go out there and maybe potentially 50-45 Francis, the 50-45 Jair Rosenstrike, who's another very, very talented kickboxer. Gane's very, very talented, but you have been on a roll lately, man, telling people that, hey, here's your parlay busters. So, listen to the man and very well could save you some money on Saturday.
Hopefully I'm right. We move to the lightweight division where we see Islam Makhachev taking on Dan the Hangman Hooker. And this is a fight that's had us worked up for a while, man. Sure. Islam, we know, is not indestructible. And odds makers would have you believing that he is at minus 700. I was telling P earlier this week that I really do feel like you could throw Hooker into any of the welterweight matchups that, aren't Usman or Colby. And I would absolutely jump on his line at plus 500 against anybody. To me, I think Islam is definitely his toughest, that this is Islam's toughest test to date with Dan Hooker, and we're really not seeing any respect whatsoever. I'll admit that since his KO loss to Martins, he's looked nothing short of dominant. But, Dan's a dog, and honestly, I do think that he has the tools to make this interesting. One of those tools, the most obvious one, I got to think, is the knees up the middle. We know Islam's going to be shooting every single round, and we've seen Dan Hooker get that done on multiple occasions, like the Ross Pearson fight, the Jim Miller fight. Another attribute that Hooker brings to the table is his sheer size, man. This is Islam's tallest opponent to date in the UFC, which might make it easier for him to get in on those takedowns, but every single round starts on the feet, and I really do love the price tag we're getting on Hooker, whether it be straight inside the distance or by TKO. I think that he'll find the timing. With the odds, I think that it's worth betting on him to find the timing, and you're not getting a good price tag if you put Islam in any parlay.
Yeah, man. I'm 100% with you. I told you, have you ever seen the South Park meme where Randy's balls are in the wheelbarrow? That is freaking Dan Hooker, man. If flying in on getting your visa on Monday and flying in to make weight on a week notice last time out doesn't tell you, dude, now he's taking the most avoided fight in the division, man. That is just Dan Hooker in a nutshell, and it's nothing but respect. It almost makes me just want to bet my money on him solely off of that.
You know he'll fight for your dollar.
Exactly, man. You look at the wars he's been in with Edson Barboza, with Dustin Poirier. Fuck yeah, he will fight for your money, you know? Not only that, he's not gone back and seen his family. He's not training at City Kickboxing. He stayed in Vegas at Syndicate MMA. Man, Dan Hooker he's got all the heart, the balls that I could really want to back. You talked about his knee up the middle. What about his calf kick, man? That was tearing Michael Chandler to pieces. We saw Gaethje land that on Khabib a couple times. For a dominant wrestler who's heavy on that lead leg, Dan Hooker, man, he doesn't telegraph it. He just chops it out there. I think that's another big thing that is going to work for him. You look at Brad Riddell, he's got some sneaky good takedown defense, and when he does get taken down, he's a fucking hard person to hold down. Mm-hmm. Do I need to begin to tell you how Izzy, that's everybody's path to beat Izzy, and how many people have been successful taking him down? Nobody but the light heavyweight champion, you know? Dan Hooker could surprise people with his takedown defense on Saturday. When it comes to Islam, he is the pupil of Khabib, man. He came in at 23. He's been more tested than Khabib was at that point of his career. And if you listen to DC talk about this guy, he'll tell you that in an open mat situation that Islam's a better wrestler than Khabib, but he doesn't offer the same finishing techniques on the mat. He's finished his last two by submission, but other than that, he had been a decision machine prior with not a lot of ground and pound to open up his submissions or anything. Islam's 100% the favorite in this fight, but we're talking about top 6 lightweights. If you run that fight back 100 times, to cover a minus 700 price tag, you've got to win 88 fucking times. You will be hard to convince me Khabib, who was perfect, 29-0, wins 88 out of 100 fights against anybody, man.
And to go on to that, you look at the Petr Yan, Aljamain Sterling, the Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera. There are going to be flukes in MMA. To think that somebody's going to be that successful at that kind of clip, you've got to know something behind the scenes. I mean, there's no way that any fighter covers that. I love John Jones, but if he fights anybody in the top 10 of 205, he's going to lose more than 12 of his fights.
Yeah, Khabib, a day notice Daryl Horcher, day notice title shot Alaquinta. Khabib wasn't even this big of a favorite. I'm in no means by telling you, hey, this plus 500 dog is going to come out here and just bull run over Islam Makhachev. But I'm going to tell you that this minus 700, I do not think comes out and just steamrolls over Dan Hooker.
Right.
And I think at a plus 500, it's pretty idiotic not to take a shot on it.
Right, especially when you take into consideration some of the performances that Dan Hooker has had. He's performed well against Alaquinta, Paul Felder, Nasrat Haqparast,
Gilbert Burns.
Those are good opponents to have wins over. And Islam, hasn't faced the upper echelon of the division. Dan Hooker's a mainstay at 155, and this is much closer than the odds would have you believe.
I'm with you, man, and we've already released I think a half unit shot plus 500 Dan Hooker. It's on MGM. We think it's a little bit of a stale line. It's hanging out there. So if you're watching the podcast, hop on that while you can. And our co-main event of the evening, interim bantamweight strap is up for grabs, where we see Petr Yan He's 15-2, taking on Corey Sandhagen, who's 14-3. Man, it does suck. I was really, really anticipating this rematch here between Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling. But at the same time, Corey Sandhagen has done enough to show that he is, he's a rightful candidate, I guess, to be in this spot, regardless of how his last performance went. With Petr Yan, I've talked about that guy for so long. He is one that since this guy got signed, he's just been one of the guys I've really, really thought had a ton of potential. He's 7-0 in the UFC, and it only took him 2 years to be into a title fight and win the belt. When I watch tape on him, it's just real hard to find any holes. His boxing is top-notch. It's some of the best pure hands that I've seen. Real good left kick. His straight left's money, and he's real defensively sound. And the way that he was able to out-grapple, get around to the back, and trip up, and get down such a high-level wrestler in Aljamain Sterling, and then watching how TJ, was able to get around to the back, put Sandhagen up on the fence, and Sandhagen not really have any answer to break the hands and get off. I think that's where Petr Yan is going to have a whole lot of success, because the size of Corey, is always a tricky puzzle to solve. Mm-hmm. He's at a team elevation, and his gas tank is one of his big attributes. Now, I know he's taken it on a relatively short notice, but you got to imagine that Corey's gas tank is probably not going to be too big of an issue. And we saw where Aljamain was able to, to get out ahead of Petr real early in round 1 and 2 with just so much volume. And Corey Sandhagen averages over 6 strikes a minute. So I think that's where he will probably have success. He needs to try to get on Petr real early and hopefully have the cardio to be able to, keep that up later in the fight where Aljo was not. But Petr is one of the real deal fighters in my division. One guy that I thought was going to rule the division for a long time. Really like what I see with him. And as tricky as Sandhagen can be at times, I got to go with the more talented fighter in Petr Yan.
Yeah, so I would agree with just about everything that you said. You touched on a bunch of good points, honestly. One, I think that if we put our biases aside, we cashed on TJ, mm-hmm. but these are probably the 2 best lightweights or bantamweights in the world. Stylistically, I do think this is probably Jan's toughest matchup to date. And I want to put on that, put an emphasis on stylistically. Mm-hmm. Although we saw the paper champ Aljo cut through Sandhagen in 1:30, I really don't see how this going that way. Right. As far as saying that this isn't the best matchup for Yan, I would agree with you that he should adopt the same game plan as Aljo. Trying to get to the mat early and often is probably where he'll have that advantage just in the wrestling department. I think I agree with you with saying that Yan is a better striker with his timing and his technique, but only by a slight margin. And I'm hesitant to even say that. Sandhagen's speed and length and awkwardness of where mm-hmm. his strikes come from really are an X factor compared to the bulk of the division.
He's got the big cage now.
And a big cage to work with. I think Sandhagen, like you said, the fast starts and Yan kind of being known for giving up a couple of rounds to find those reads on the feet and figure out a way to work inside of Sandhagen's length. I think that there is a legitimate live betting opportunity for Yan here. This being such a high level fight, I think a -250 price tag on anybody in the bantamweight division is a little bit steep. Mm-hmm. A prime example is the Corey Sandhagen, TJ Dillashaw fight, where we hadn't seen TJ in 2 years, but we were more than willing to put a unit on him at +60. It just, it being a shark tank between Aljo, TJ, Yan, and Sandhagen, any given night, one of those guys could have their hands raised. And for me, I won't be touching the Yan line unless before fight time it dips under 2-1, mm-hmm. or I can get that live betting opportunity with Yan.
I love everything about it that you said there. I'm staying away from Petr as well. A little bit further down in the guys that I like to parlay, and it's just because that trickiness that Corey has. You saw him break out the spinning wheel kick and catch Marlon. You mm-hmm. saw him lure Frankie Edgar in and land the flying knee. And
that was after the Aljamain Sterling loss, so
right.
that he made changes to his game to combat those heavy grapplers.
Yep. And yeah, man, Corey Sandhagen, if it goes to decision, I think he's covered his price tag alone. And I think this fight probably does go to decision. If there's a finish here, I think it's Yan maybe getting a late 4 or 5 round finish. I know we always talk about the Sandhagen cardio, mm-hmm. but he is taking it on about 5 or 6 weeks notice, so the cardio might not all be there all the way. Petr Yan for my pick, but yeah, man, I don't think I'm going to parlay him or pick or actually bet him either.
Which is really weird because I think that we could both agree that Jan's probably top 3 in pound for pound rankings.
Yeah, he's so good.
And to get him at one of the better price tags on this main card compared to some of the other matchups is weird that we're not playing him. But I
more out of respect to Corey.
Right, for sure. In our main event for the evening, we move to the light heavyweight division where we see Jan Blachowicz taking on Glover Teixeira. Blachowicz is looking to make his second title defense against Father Time in this main event, man. This is Glover's second time fighting for the belt and definitely his best chance of winning it.
Yeah.
As much as I am excited to see these two fight, I'd be upset with myself if I didn't mention that these probably aren't the two best fighters in their own division.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, I am excited to see this fight happen, and both these guys have really hit their strides later on in their fighting career and seem to gain the experience that they needed to make a difference in getting these consecutive wins in their career. They've both heavily relied on their fight IQ to maintain their current win streaks, far more than they ever had in the past. And, although Yan has had a lot of success getting his most recent fights to the ground, like in the Izzy fight, I doubt his game plan involves going to the ground with Glover at all, who pretty much lives and dies by dragging you to the mat. I got to shit on Glover a little bit. I understand that he can't pick his opponents, but his win streak is a little weak, man. Personally, I think that he avoided all of the guys that we talk about the most, the Yuri Prozaknia, the Magomed Ankalaev, the Alexander Rakic. Those are guys that I all think would probably shit on both these guys. Man, I really do think that we're gonna probably see Glover get flatlined, and unless Yan allows him to get up close to him, which I don't see happening, it should be a pretty easy night. I gotta think, even in that Glover-Santos fight in his last one, I think that Glover gets knocked out more times than he wins that fight. It was just his night that night, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Blachowicz's most concerning fight that I saw, and it was the Jacare fight. It's a pretty comparable fight as far as Jacare being old as shit and being a primary grappler. And we got to recognize that Yan gave up 8 minutes of control time to a smaller primary grappler. As much as I want this one to just be a Yan KO, I really do think that there is potential, if Glover has success, for this to be the 6th main event in a row that we see go to decision.
Man, I really, really hope not. But I do see this going pretty much the same way with the Blachowicz knockout. When you mention a career revival, you have to mention Jan Blachowicz. He came over from KSW in Poland, and he starts off 2-4 in his first 6 fights with the UFC. He's on the verge of getting cut, and but he's fighting legit guys. He's fighting Latifi, Manoa, Gus, Corey Anderson right out the gates. And I don't know what's changed, if it's running through the woods, finding the dead body, but something has fucking changed, man, because he's won 9 of his last 10 fights. He's avenged the losses to Manoa and to Anderson. And, dude, finally starting to get some respect on his name. He's the plus 200 to Rockhold in the Anderson rematch to Reyes. He's the plus 200 to the middleweight champ, Israel Adesanya, coming up. And we're finally seeing him here as a significant favorite, something we haven't seen in quite some time from Blachowicz. We always got to mention the Blachowicz that we call. He leads with that lead uppercut, which would get you caught with high-level strikers, but I don't know if it's going to be a concern here with Glover. I feel like the more concern is that Glover would time a takedown off of something like that, or get the double underhooks and be able to put Blachowicz on the cage. But Blachowicz, man, he ends that body kick with just devastating fashion. You saw it tear Reyes to shreds. His counter hooks have very much improved. And it's just really going to come down, can he keep Glover off of him? Have he patched up the takedown issues? That was the problem in Latifi. That was the problem in the Corey Anderson fight. And if he does rock Glover, he needs to be patient. Don't rush it like Roberson. Don't rush it like Santos. Don't rush it like Ion Kutelaba did. Be patient, back up. Don't let Glover somehow find a way to clinch up and get this fight down to the mat. With Glover, you talked about it. The dude's 41. He's fighting time at this point, and regardless of how this fight ends on Saturday, I think it's the end of the road for Glover, to be honest with you, man. There's not a better way to ride out on top if you win this belt. He doesn't want to defend the belt against the three guys you just mentioned coming up in Jiri, Rakic, or Ankalaev. And guess what? You lose this fight, you're in the back of the line. Guess who you're fighting? Jiri, Rakic, Ankalaev to get your spot back up. So yeah, I think Glover calls it quits on Saturday. His legs are going to get absolutely chewed up by Jan's calf kick. And what Glover does awful is he ducks his head in every one of the exchanges that he starts. You saw Anthony Johnson put his tooth up into the ceiling when he knocked him out with it. You saw Gustafsson land a combo that had like 8 uppercuts in it before he put him out. It's Jan Blachowicz' uppercut that's going to get the job done here on Saturday for me. I think he's going to hurt him, and when he's closing distance, pop, short uppercut, Glover hits the mat. I think we see Yan still on Saturday.
Something else I want to touch on is it is the bigger octagon, and Glover being as old as he is, he doesn't have the footwork to close the distance unless you're engaging with him. And after watching Jan Blachowicz kind of piece up Israel Adesanya and win some of those striking exchanges, I don't think that he's going to have an issue circling out of his back against the cage and keeping this standing for for as long as it lasts.
I'm with you, man. I'm on Blachowicz. I think he can win this knockout. I think he can he can take this to decision and win it. Whereas Glover, man, his best path for me is inside the distance, because I don't know if the 41-year-old technically can grapple 25 minutes to keep Blachowicz down. I think Blachowicz will find a way to work back to his feet and land those punches. Appreciate you guys watching our breakdown. That's 15 fights we got. Prelims start at 10:30 Eastern on Saturday. Make sure you get up, get your cup of coffee, and tune in for them. We're going to go with the casual cap challenge on the prelim main event again. We got Amanda Ribas versus Verna Jandiroba. Let you guide Ribas. I'm going to take the dog in Jandiroba. I think it's a very close, very similar style matchup. Mm-hmm. Should be a fun one. But as always, do a little recap. There's a whole fight on the card everybody needs to make sure to pay attention for. Which one is it? It's
got to be the co-main event, man.
Nice.
I think Sandhagen and Yan match up perfectly, and as long as this stays on the feet, we're in for a fucking dogfight.
Yeah, man. I think it's a perfectly line matchup. For me, I'm going to go with the main event, Blachowicz versus Teixeira. You got a 38-year-old, a 41-year-old. You know you're going to get Teixeira's best version of him, trying to ride out on top on Saturday. I do not think this one hits the judges' scorecards, but we've said that multiple times over the last 5 weeks. But I think this is a fun one, man. I think Blachowicz gets the job done. If there's a fighter to watch, who's it going to be?
It's going to have to be Glover. Like you said, he's on the brink of retirement here, and win or lose, we might see him lay down the gloves. So definitely a person to keep an eye out on.
For me, it's probably a pretty obvious one, Khamzat Chimaev.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit going underneath the radar this time. He's not just the main star on the card getting all the love. Bunch of good fights. He's returning. He's got the COVID kind of situation, taking some steps up. But, man, we think he is generational talent, and I think he's going to put on a show on the pay-per-view on Saturday. What about an underdog for you?
So the underdog, I'm not sure if he has the best chance to win as an underdog, but I know he's the most mispriced. Dan Hooker, man. I think that he definitely has a shot of getting a win here, and at plus 500, it's just ridiculous. You kind of have to jump on it as a capper.
Absolutely. If you're a numbers guy, to say Islam wins this 88 times out of 100 to cover that minus 700, we'll just have to agree to disagree if you don't think so. For me, I'm going to go Jandiroba in the casual cap. I personally think, they have similar skill set on the mat, and if you do see two people like that, it's oftentimes does get canceled. You see you see a fight play out on the feet, which I think should be a pick 'em. So I can't hate my plus 135 on Jandiroba. My prop bet for the night is Ismagulov decision, even money. I know it's asking him to kind of have a boring fight. That's what
Ismagulov does.
It's a surgical approach every time, wins them all by decision, and you can get even money for what he usually does, man. So I don't hate that. What about yourself?
So mine's got to be the Hugh Yaozong versus Andre Petroski. Doesn't go the distance. Right now it's somewhere around a minus 175, and I honestly think that hits at about a minus 300, minus 350. I think you're getting excellent value there, and one that I plan on hitting pretty hard.
Nice, man. What about your best bet on the whole card?
Best bet's got to be Ankalaev, man. I mean, I'm about as hyped up as I possibly can be for a fight as in his return. Like we said, we both think that he's kind of the dark horse of this division and probably the most skilled in the division, and it's just a matter of time before he touches gold.
I feel that, man. For me, I'm gonna take Duraev inside the distance. You get a much better line if you take him inside the distance, and he's got a very opponent in front of him, primary striker, who he can take down and get out of there. Duraev in the parlay, Duraev inside the distance, my best bet on Saturday. I appreciate you guys watching. Hop in the comments. Let us know how you have in some of these fights. It helps a whole lot when you comment and interact in the video. Make sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next week.
Peace.